Wiped the dust off the desk to take a photo, then froze. Sitting on top was a report card printed last week from a school that shut down in 2003. I'm a freelance photographer. Most of my work is local, urban exploration, abandoned houses, factories, hospitals. The creepier, the better. I post my work online, and it usually gets decent attention, especially when I document places with tragic histories. A few months ago I got a message from a follower tipping me off to a location I'd never heard of. Westfield Elementary. According to them, it had been closed for over 20 years, but the building was still mostly intact and untouched by vandals. That's rare. I looked into it, and sure enough, Westfield shut down in 2003 due to structural concerns. But I couldn't find many photos, no real documentation. It was like people had just forgotten it existed. That alone made it worth checking out. I drove out there on a grey Wednesday afternoon. The school was deep in the woods, accessible only by a cracked service road that looked like it hadn't been driven on in years. As I approached, I got this strange pressure in my chest, like a storm was about to hit. The building itself was a single-story brick structure, long, low, and quiet. No graffiti, no broken windows, no obvious signs of life. It was eerie. I slipped in through a side door someone had propped open with a cinder block. Inside, the air was musty but dry. The hall still smelled faintly of old pencils, textbooks, and whatever cheap disinfectant schools used in the early 2000s. The place was a time capsule, student artwork still on the walls, faded motivational posters in the classrooms, even a bulletin board that said "Have a great summer" in bright foam letters. I spent over an hour wandering and taking photos. The deeper I went, the weirder it got. Some classrooms looked like they'd been packed up neatly. Others looked like the students had left in the middle of the day. Open notebooks on desks, backpacks slumped on chairs, even a half-finished jigsaw puzzle in the library. Then I found room 17. It was in T on any of the blueprints I'd found online. Just a narrow door between the nurse's office and an old janitor's closet. The plaque had fallen off, but there were smudges where it had once been. I pushed the door open. The classroom inside was pristine. The lights didn't work, but sunlight filtered in through half-drawn blinds, casting long, sharp shadows across the room. And right there, on the teacher's desk, was a report card. Crisp white paper, not yellowed, no mold. My first thought was that it had to be a prank, something left behind by another explorer. But when I picked it up, my skin went cold. It was dated last week. The year was right, the school name, even the logo, updated with the district's new branding. This wasn't some old form, this was fresh, and the name on it was Micah Holloway. I recognized it immediately. Micah Holloway was a 10-year-old boy who went missing 3 towns over. His face had been on every news broadcast for the past month. A camping trip with his family, he wandered off into the woods and never came back. My first instinct was to call the police, but I hesitated. What would I even say? Hey, I found a fresh report card for a missing kid in a school that has been shut down for 20 years. I snapped a photo of the report card and started backing out. But something changed. The air grew heavy, thick, like trying to breathe through wet fabric. The classroom, once warm, dropped several degrees in seconds. That's when I heard it. Asterisk, asterisk, a child's voice. Behind me, whispering, asterisk, asterisk. I spun around. No one there. Then I noticed one of the desks, old kind, wooden with a metal frame, was slowly rocking back and forth. Just gently. The whispers returned, louder now, still unintelligible, but layered more than one voice. Kids, dozens of them, chanting, crying, I couldn't tell. I backed out of the room, heart pounding, and slammed the door shut. As soon as I did, the air cleared. The weight on my chest lifted. The hallway felt normal again. I didn't wait around. I bolted for the exit, jumped in my car, and drove straight home. That night, I couldn't stop staring at the photo on my camera. The report card was still there. Micah's name, clear as day. Grades, teacher, signature, but something else had appeared in a photo that I hadn't seen in person. In the background, through the classroom window, was the faint outline of a child standing in the woods. Small frame, backpack, head tilted sideways. I sent the photo anonymously to the local police tip line. No clue if they followed up. A week later, a small article was posted saying the Holloway search had been scaled back. Nothing more. I haven't been back to Westfield. I won't. But sometimes I think about that report card, about how it got there, who filled it out, and whether Micah was the only one in that classroom, because when I looked closer at the photo again a few days later, the report card had more names written on it, names that weren't there. Every night at exactly 3:17 a.m. The intercom in the abandoned elementary school clicks on for 47 seconds. A child's voice cries softly through the speakers, begging for her mom. The building's been empty for over 25 years. I work in school district security. Most of my job involves reviewing overnight footage from old buildings that are either scheduled for renovation or set to be demolished. It's boring work, mostly grainy camera feeds, occasional raccoons, maybe a few dumb kids breaking in for But this building, Westridge Elementary, was different. Westridge had been closed since 1998 after an electrical fire damaged a wing of the building. No one was hurt, but budget cuts meant the school was never reopened. It just sat there for decades, fenced off, slowly rotting. A few months ago, the district finally voted to tear it down, and that's when they contracted me to install new surveillance and monitor the property overnight for That's how I first saw it. It started on the 4th night of monitoring. I was scrubbing through footage at 4 a.m., half asleep, when something made me pause. Every hallway camera, 12 in total, captured the same thing. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the PA system crackled on. You could hear it in the background, that familiar pop of static before an announcement. Then came the voice. It was faint, like it was coming from a faraway mic, but unmistakable. A child, a little girl, crying, "Mommy, Mummy, I'm scared. I want to go home." The message lasted 47 seconds. Then silence. Then the PA clicked off. I assumed it was a prank. Maybe a squatter rigged something up. So the next night I stayed up and watched the footage live. Sure enough, 3:17 came, and the audio clicked on asterisk again. Same voice, same words, same duration. Every hallway lit with dim red security lights. Totally empty. But the voice echoed like it was coming from the school's own speaker system. Thing is, the school-less electricity had been completely shut off since 2004. The PA system shouldn't have worked. It wasn't even connected to anything. I flagged it to the district. They didn't seem interested. Probably didn't want to delay the demolition with rumors or ghost stories. So I decided to go there myself. I had every reason not to, but something about the voice. It sounded real, not a recording. Like a kid actually lost in the building. I had to know. I got there around 2:45 a.m. The air was sharp and wet, like the kind of cold that clings to your clothes. The building creaked with age. My flashlight barely lit the hallways, and the silence was asterisk total. Even my footsteps felt muffled. I walked to the main office first, where the old PA system was. The mic was still there, dusty, untouched, no power running to the wall. I triple-checked. Then, at 3:17 a.m., the silence broke. Click. That same soft static spilled into the halls. I heard it from above overhead speakers still wired throughout the school. And then, again, "Mummy, Mummy, I'm scared. I want to go home." The sound came from asterisk everywhere, surrounding me, and it was clearer this time. I could hear her sniffling between the words, hear the tremble in her voice. I wanted to call out, but I felt frozen. My limbs were heavy, my mouth dry. It was like the sound itself was pressing down on me. I forced myself toward the nearest classroom, room 102. Inside, rows of tiny desks faced a chalkboard smeared with faded math problems. It was as if nothing had been touched. But the worst part, in the back corner, was a chair. A small one, rocking slowly, like someone had just gotten out of it. The PA crackled off. Silence again. And then something new. A second voice. Lower, rougher, whispering words I couldn't understand. It wasn't coming from the speakers, it was asterisk in the room. Behind me, I spun around with my flashlight, heart slamming in my chest. But there was no one. Just the chair, still rocking. Then the classroom door slammed shut on its own, hard enough to shake the windows. I bolted. I don't remember how I got out. Just flashes running down the hall, lights flickering. Even though there shouldn't have been power. That second voice following me, whispering faster, more urgently. By the time I reached the car, the sun was starting to rise. I sat there for 20 minutes before I could bring myself to drive. Later that day, I did some digging. Back in 1998, the same year the school closed, a girl named Ellie Travers went missing, 10 years old. Last seen at Westridge during an after-school program. Police believed she left the building alone and wandered off into the woods, but her body was never found. Her mother, Margaret Travers, used to call the school office every day after the disappearance, leaving voicemails for her daughter, hoping she'd come back. They say her final message was just her sobbing, saying, "Ellie, please come home. Mummy's waiting." Here's the part that still keeps me up. The audio on the footage, I had it cleaned up by a tech-savvy friend. He filtered the background layers. He said, underneath the girl's voice, there was something else. Another whisper, a man's voice, faint, but audible. We played it over and over. It said, asterisk, asterisk, she's not going home, asterisk, asterisk. And now, every night at 3:17 a.m., even though I quit the job, even though Westridge has been torn down and turned into a grassy field, I still hear the click of that PA system in my tea. The smell of mold or rot that made me stop it was the sound of desks, dozens of them, screeching across the concrete floor below me, in a school that hadn't seen a student in over 20 years. I grew up in a small, forgotten town in western Pennsylvania, the kind of place where abandoned buildings were more common than working ones. There was one in particular we all knew about, Coleridge High. It had been shut down in the early 2000s after an electrical fire damaged to the West Wing. No one ever rebuilt it. The town didn't have the budget or the will. Over time, the place just rotted, slowly collapsing into itself. Windows boarded up, weeds climbing the brick, doors chained shut. But kids are stupid and curious, especially with a phone and a flashlight. Last year, my friends and I decided to go inside. It was me, Luke, and Jamie. We'd heard the rumors how people who broke in sometimes heard footsteps or distant announcements over the old PA system. None of us believed that crap. We just wanted a creepy adventure, maybe a few We found a broken window near the back gym. Easy entry. Inside, it was exactly what you'd expect. Desks flipped over, lockers dented and rusted, graffiti everywhere. Someone had written "he's still teaching" across the main hallway in red spray paint. Dumb, edgy stuff, probably done by other teenagers. We split up to get different shots. Luke went to the auditorium, Jamie stayed upstairs near the old science labs, and I headed toward the lower levels. That's when things started to feel wrong. There was a stairwell that led to the basement level. I only found it because part of the floor had collapsed near the east hallway, revealing rusted railings and concrete steps hidden beneath old plywood. The air got colder as I descended, like a freezer door had opened. The basement wasn't on any of the old school maps we'd found online. It wasn't listed in any school records either, not even janitorial plans. But there it was, a long, narrow corridor lined with metal doors. Most were locked, some warped by water damage. But one door at the far end stood out. It was newer, clean, almost like it had been replaced recently. There was no label on it, no room number, no subject, no purpose, just a plain, grey door with a heavy lock. And as I stepped closer, that's when I heard it screech, a desk dragging across the concrete, then another and another. Slow, deliberate, scraping like nails down a chalkboard. There was no mistaking the sound. I'd heard it 1,000 times in classrooms growing up, but this place had been abandoned for decades. There couldn't be anyone down here, not legitimately. I backed up a few steps, hard thudding. I called out, "Hello, Luke, Jamie." No answer. I lifted my phone to record, but the flashlight flickered and died. Screen to completely black. Battery had been at 70% 5 minutes earlier. Suddenly, the dragging stopped. Silence. And then, tap, 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 from the other side of the door, like someone knocking, with their fingernails. I turned and ran up the stairs, barely able to see, one hand on the wall to guide me. My breath fogged in the air, even though it was I could still hear the knocking, growing louder, more frantic. By the time I reached the upper floor, I was drenched in sweat. My phone flickered back to life right as I burst into the main hall. I called out again, and this time, I got a response. Jamie came jogging down the corridor, confused and pale. "Where the hell were you?" he asked. "We've been calling you." I told him what I heard. Luke joined us a few minutes later, but something was wrong with him. He looked shaken, like he'd seen something, but wouldn't talk about it. He just said, "We need to leave now." We didn't argue. Back home, I tried to find anything online about that basement. Nothing. No blueprints. No rumors beyond the usual ghost stories. But 2 days later, Jamie sent me something. A blurry forum post from 2011, Just a few sentences from a guy claiming to have worked demolition on Coldridge. Said they were told not to touch the basement classroom stat, that it had been added secretly in the 80s. For what? The post didn't say it ended abruptly. The account was deleted. Here's the thing though, that night, after we'd left to school, I started hearing something strange in my own house. Faint, but unmistakable. When everything was quiet like 3 or 4 a.m., I'd hear it under the floorboards. Screech. I tore up my basement trying to find anything. Pipes. Animals. Nothing. Eventually, the noises stopped. But sometimes, I think about that door, that clean, grey door in the basement that nobody remembers building. I wonder if someone, or something, is still behind it, still rearranging the desks, still waiting for a student to come in late. I haven't told anyone else. But if you ever find yourself in an abandoned school, and you hear the sound of metal scraping across concrete, don't go looking for where it's coming from.